Radio days and nights. While in the military overseas, I volunteered to work as an announcer for Armed Forces Radio and Television Service, otherwise known as AFARTS. This particular group is sizable, but not as big as the staff in operation in the movie Good Morning Vietnam with Robin Williams. This was where I formerly got the DJ bug, which I still have to this day. After leaving the military, I attended a radio school in Kansas City for several months and graduated at the top of my class. School was where I was dubbed Dr. Bob as my radio handle. I still respond to it. I did secure a job for a small market radio station in the upper Midwest. It was so small, all employees did virtually everything, from selling ads and sponsorships and recording commercials to writing news and cleaning up. Anything to make the operation go in the right direction. For reasons I don't remember, I became involved in broadcasting sports for the local high school, which had quite a reputation for championship teams in baseball, football, and basketball. I found myself assigned to do color commentary for local football games, which was fun. I had a fair knowledge of football, so that went really well. It was also fun because you became a minor celebrity in the eyes of the community. The first year I did sports, the football team had a brand new coach, and I was assigned to host a Saturday morning program called Coach's Corner. The program was broadcast live from a local cafe and was extremely well attended. If you didn't get there early, there was no way you were going to get a place to sit. Given that the coach was new to the area, he was going to be the featured guest on the first episode of the year. The show ran for an hour and started off with a summary of the previous night's game, then on to an interview with the coach. Fans could ask questions if time allowed. Prior to the broadcast, I had a chance to visit for a fair amount of time with the coach, just to get some sense of where he was and what he wanted to talk about. He was a pleasant enough fellow, and I looked forward to our interview. After introducing him to the radio audience, I asked my first question, which was something to the effect of, "Well, Coach, it was a great victory last night, pulled off in the later moments of the game. What would you say was the turning point?" He replied in 2 words, "The fumble." Okay, and just the fumble. That was it. Despite pressing him for details, this guy was not going to give up any more information or thoughts about the game, which was the entire reason everyone was there or listening on the radio. I looked at my watch and started to get a little panicky, realizing that we had 57 minutes to fill. So we broke for a commercial while I tried to formulate a plan of how to straighten this thing out and get this goofy fucker to say something. Later it crossed my mind that I should have hit him in the face with a hammer, just to get a rise out of him and to make an hour-long program out of it. Of course, as soon as we broke into commercial, the coach lit up like a highway flare. He started to talk so fast that it was like he was set on fast forward. He talked and talked and talked until we came back from commercial. Then he shut up again. I realized I was only going to get monosyllables out of this guy. I had to conduct the interview and become both sides of the back and forth. By the time the program was over, it felt like it had taken 6 or 7 hours. It was exhausting. But it was also great training for future broadcast events. That was when I finally turned pro. I assumed things would never be worse than that. I was wrong. On a Friday afternoon, the station manager called me and said that the person who normally did color commentary for the high school basketball games was unable to do it. He asked if I would sit in for him as a favor. Since I was a seasoned veteran following the Coach's Corner debacle, I agreed. I actually looked forward to it. It didn't occur to me how visual basketball was as a sport until I entered the auditorium. Wait, this was radio. With all of the passing going on, it was impossible to relate who had the ball and what they were doing, especially not knowing the terminology, like shooting from the top of the key. It meant nothing to me. Like, where the hell was the key? It was very difficult to describe the action since I knew almost nothing about basketball. See previous chapter on basketball. The best I could do was make lame-ass comments like, "That kid is really tall, and his team sure throws the ball a lot." The whole experience was pretty awful, but the bizarre thing about my announcing was that no one seemed to notice. Unlike the time I was in studio broadcasting by myself and had to do a 15-minute newscast at the top of the hour, while the record was playing, I went to the UPI teletype machine to prepare for a rip and read. UPI put together newscasts ranging in length from 5 to 30 minutes, and all you had to do was find a program, rip it off the machine, go back into the studio, and read the news. The difficulty that day was the teletype had run out of paper, and the previous newscast was in the trash covered in coffee grounds and somebody's nasty old tissues. That meant there was no news to read, and I had only 2 commercials to play, plus some public service announcements. I had no choice but to ad-lib the news, something like, authorities indicate that today's unseasonably warm weather is due to increasing temperatures, and that the weather tomorrow will be much like the weather we had yesterday, except it might be warmer and may even have a chance of rain. I droned on, and thankfully ran up my 15 minutes. I signed off, went home and asked my wife if she'd heard the news. She said she had, so I asked what she thought. She said it sounded fine to her. That really made me wonder if anybody was listening at all. Was anyone paying attention? How much stuff could I get away with? Hello? Is anyone there?
Hi kids. The Canadian government announced today plans to introduce the Canadian favorite poutine made from cheese, fries, and gravy to the U.S. market. It should be noted that previous efforts to entice America to try poutine were greeted with comments like repulsive and no way mofo. Undeterred, Canadian marketing firms have been retained by the government to try again by renaming the local delicacy to simply salad. The National Weather Service has issued their winter forecast for the U.S., and they predict that El Nino will be replaced by a new phenomenon called El Poutine. It's been reported that the National Weather Service is reporting mass resignations in protest, saying that our Canadian brothers and sisters can't help they're over their alleged love of the Canadian treat. Okay, poutine. Elsewhere in Canada, why this is all Canadian news, I have no idea, especially since this is coming from the United States. Elsewhere in Canada, the radical group calling themselves Black Peace is taking credit for the recent upsurge in forest fires in Canada. The group's leader, Alsatian Smith, said in a statement that, and I quote, "There are too many trees in Canada anyway," and they block the view of Canada's once pristine landscapes. The group also announced plans to protest the planned reintroduction of poutine to the U.S. market. In a statement, poutine represents an affront to all of mankind. Okay, well, that's the news for now, and poutine is going to be renamed salad. So with that, we'll be on with the rest of the program.
Chapter 12. Ronnie. In the country, my next farm neighbor was Ronnie. We represented the very worst of the human animal, that of the 12-year-old male, capable of incredible acts of stupidity driven out of pure boredom. Ronnie and I built the treehouse, a boat, and the world's fastest thing with lawnmower wheels. During winter vacation, we watched some Olympic events on TV, one being toboggan racing, or whatever it is they call it, and we decided in our joint infinite wisdom that we needed to build one of those tracks for our toboggan. Now, before we go any further, I need to explain cow paths. When cows are allowed to wander through pastures feeding themselves, they return to the barn late in the day for milking. They tend to walk in single file, following the same path every day, which eventually becomes a well-worn path about 2 feet wide. A hill right behind Ronnie's house had a steep cow path that ran for about 50 yards before making a sweeping turn to the right and continuing for several hundred yards. It was obviously perfect for a toboggan track. In our pre-project analysis, we realized that the turn at the bottom of the hill required a bank due to the incredible high speeds we knew we would attain. Note, during our design review, we didn't fully take into account the number of trees present on both sides of our proposed track. We next set about construction. Fortunately, we had a large snowfall that winter, so there was plenty of material available. Using snow shovels, we outlined the path and began the process of constructing the curve, which we wanted to look exactly like the ones we had seen on TV. Our first test run was with an empty toboggan, which we sent down the track. It went over the top of the curve, and we giggled with excitement at the thought of the speeds that we would reach. Once we finally committed to a run with an occupied toboggan, we worked on the curve over a period of a few days, building, shaping, testing, and finally hauling buckets of water from the house and using garden sprayers to coat the track with water until we reached a nice glossy sheet of ice. We made yet another dry run with an unmanned toboggan, and it was quite spectacular. We were thrilled, to say the least. We planned our initial run for the following day, but during a last-minute track inspection, realized that we needed more ice if we were to attain maximum velocity. We also realized that we had failed to prepare the toboggan itself, so using some Johnson's paste wax, we polished the bottom of the toboggan to a perfect sheen. At that point, we were ready to go. We began by dragging the toboggan up to the top of the hill, then briefly discussing our plan. We would launch from a ledge at the top, which we had devised to be just like the guys in the Olympics. We would sit in the toboggan, then launch ourselves using our hands. Ronnie wanted to occupy the front for steering, as much as that is possible. We launched ourselves onto the slope, and after having traveled about 18 inches, we were traveling at approximately 87 miles an hour. We hadn't accounted for the weight difference between an unmanned vehicle and one with one real weight on it. As we quickly gained speed, we prepared ourselves for the G-forces we would have to endure when we rounded the curve, but it never happened. Oh no, we went through the curve, not around it, straight through, right into a tree. Long pause. Are you dead? There was no second attempt.